Okay, 4 questions, homework from Wednesday night. We have 4 questions from our rational number chapters. The first one gives us 4 rational numbers, and I'll take my highlighter just so you can see them a little bit better. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And it asks you to take those 4 rational numbers and rewrite them in ascending order. So we have a terminating negative decimal. We have a negative proper fraction. We also have another proper fraction that's negative, and we have a negative repeating decimal. In all of those cases, you need to choose a form that you would like to compare them in. If you choose fractions, they must be fractions with common denominators, or decimals, and of course we all agree that decimals is the easiest. So the first one's not going to change. The second one, 2/3, negative 2/3 is negative 0.6 repeating. And I'm going to put 3 decimal places to show the repeating decimal. And over here, because it's terminating, I'm going to add 2 zeros just for comparison's sake. If I take this one and I think about it without a calculator, negative 20/40 is a half. So it's going to be negative 0.5. And again, because this has 3 decimal places and this has 3, I'll add a couple of zeros. And finally, this one here is negative 0.7171. So I'm going to keep 3 decimal places and rewrite it like that. And now that we're asked to write it in ascending order, that means from smallest to largest. And because we're dealing with negative numbers, if this is 0 and this is negative 1, the farther a number is when it's negative from 0 is the smaller it is. So if I'm going to write this in ascending order, I want to choose the smallest number first, in which case negative 2/3 is my smallest number. My next, oh no, it's not. I lied to you. Let's move that over. It's my second smallest. My smallest number would be negative 0.71 repeating. That's our smallest because that's the farthest from 0. Then negative decimal 6 repeating is our next. And then this one, which is negative 0.6 terminating decimal, is our next farthest from 0. And finally, our closest to 0 is this one, which means negative 20/40 is our largest number. And therefore, that's how we would rewrite it in ascending order. Second one asks you to choose a decimal that exists between the fractions 1/4 and 1/5. Now, there are 2 ways to do this as well. The first way you could do it is you could change them to fractions that are not in lowest terms. And then you could say, okay, if I put a 0 on both of these or multiply both by 10, I would create an equivalent fraction of 50/200ths and 40/200ths. A fraction that would exist between those two would be 45/200ths. And if I wanted to change that to a decimal, I could take my calculator and say, what is 45 divided by 200? And the answer would be 0.225. 0.225. That would be a decimal that's between there. It's actually right between those two. Another way you could have done that, instead of changing them to fractions, and I'll just leave my answer there, is you could have changed this to a decimal and this to a decimal and simply ask yourself what's between 25 and 20. The one that's right between it is 0.22 or 22.5. So you could have done it that way as well. Both methods work, and as long as you have good number sense, it doesn't matter which method you choose. You should be able to do both methods, really, at the end of the day. The third question is exactly like the first question, except it's reversed. This time you're asked to find a fraction between these 2 decimals. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to add an insignificant 0 to both. Okay? And I'm going to ask myself, since those 2 numbers are the same, what number exists midway between those 2 as a decimal? We know that the answer would be 85/100ths. And now that we wrote it like that, I have to be able to take a decimal form and write it as a fraction, and my answer is 85/100ths. If I wanted to reduce it to lowest terms, I could divide it by 5, and that would be 17. Is that right? 17 20ths. Okay. So you can say 85/100ths is a fraction that's between 0.8 and 0.9, and you can also say in lowest terms that's 17 20ths. That is the easiest way to do it. Another way you could have done it was like we did the last one, but that's definitely the easiest method. And finally, your last one, what what lowest term fraction is this red dot? If I add an insignificant zero, or a couple insignificant zeros, I should say, I haven't changed the value. I just added insignificant zeros. So now I have 0.800 and 0.810. And I know the decimal that exists between those two is going to be 0.805, right? And once I have that, if I read that as being 805 thousandths, that is the fraction that exists on that red dot midway between the two. And if I reduce that down to lowest terms, 1,000 divided by 5 is 200, and 800 divided by 5 is 40 plus 141. No, that's not right. Need a calculator. My brain's not working right now. 805 divided by 5. Somebody help me quick before I press it. 161, that's better. 161 200ths is the lowest term fraction that exists on that red dot.